in the east, but with some showers moving in from the west. Overnight, we'll hold on to clear spells and blustery showers, although most of the showers are likely in the west. And that is how the weather is shaping up into tomorrow morning.
On Mark Dolan tonight in my Big Opinion monologue, Rishi Sunak must stand up to militant trade unions. It's the biggest test of his premiership. It's make or break for the economy, the country and his political future. My Mark Meets guest is former Brexit Party MEP Annunciata Rees-Mogg. And in my take at 10, it's time for Britain to tackle its bulging waistline. And I have the answer. It might just change your life. Plus tomorrow's papers and my all-star panel. A big show tonight. We're live from 9. I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Police in the UK spend £66,000 on rainbow merchandise. The Prime Minister wants everyone to be a mathematician, and activists claim that the countryside is racist. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So this is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics. And of course, we'll have the latest from those sweet and lovable social justice activists who would happily burn you at the stake for your lack of compassion. Coming up on the show, we have author Kara Dansky, who will join us from America to talk about the US Court of Appeal ruling regarding single-sex bathrooms in US schools. Historian David Oldroyd Bolt will be here to discuss the legacy of former Pope Benedict XVI, who passed away last week. We'll reflect on the potential ramifications of a lawsuit in which the stars of Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, which came out in 1968, are now suing Paramount Pictures for sexual abuse over a nude scene they appeared in. Plus, we'll be answering questions from our wonderful studio audience. And my studio guests this evening are the fantastic comedians Sajila Kershi and Francis Foster. How are you, Francis? Good New Year. Did you do anything?
Yeah, it's good. It was very nice. I played bingo on New Year.
That's a great thing to do on New Year.
Yes, I did problematic bingo.
What is problem? Well, it's all problematic, isn't it?
No, I was the announcer. Is it a he? Is it a she? It's 43.
Oh, there we go. There we go. You see, that's a good solution to New Year, doing something like that, rather than overspending, going to pubs and all that sort of thing. No, that's a really good idea. What about you? What did you do, Sajila?
Christmas is my favourite time of the year, and we finally got it right. So we have, because we used to get that tandoori turkey when we were kids, and it's not quite Christmas, Mum. But now we've got the blandest turkey ever.
you've
We're
got
like
the
so
other way
good. Yeah,
now.
Jamie Oliver types. Yeah. No, and actually, I was here Christmas evening. I was here. I gave up my evening to do headliners. So
Well, there we go.
it's the first time ever in my life I've worked on Christmas Day.
It's good for you.
Yeah, I liked it. I really enjoyed it.
I was here on New Year's Eve doing headliners.
Oh.
Yeah, that was nice with Lewis Schaefer, who gave me a gout testing kit.
Yeah, what was that about?
That was a gift. He gave me this gift live on air. I didn't know what to do about that,
I
really.
mean, you do have the look, Andrew.
Of someone with gout. Well, I don't know how to take that, so let's just divert into our audience, and they will save the day. We've got some questions from our audience, and today we're going to start with Danny. Where is Danny? Hello, Danny.
Hello. Yeah, do the police spend too much money on rainbow-themed products?
Yes, so apparently, and we've got a guest later from the Taxpayers Alliance, they've compiled a report and they've shared it with the Telegraph, and apparently police in the UK have spent £66,000 on rainbow merchandise, things like flags, shoelaces, pens and lip balm. And the spending took place between 2019 and 2022. This involved 27 forces across England and Wales. Tom Ryan of the Taxpayers Alliance said, quote, "With crime on the up, it will bring little comfort to Brits knowing that bobbies are kitted out with rainbow merchandise." Well, that can't be true. What do you think?
I have to say, I misread that from bobbies to boobies, and I was thinking, what? That's outrageous, political correctness. And I was like, that doesn't help.
No, that's your
but no, that's my thing. Yeah. No, we had this story last night in headliners. Honestly, I think it's great, solidarity, blah blah blah, everything else.
Yeah.
But can we just get merchandise from the shops rather than our police force spending a fortune of our money?
It does seem a weird priority,
it's ridiculous. And like lip balms, who's using these lip balms? I didn't realise that was a priority for the police, that they've got like dry lips.
Well, I think no.
Just arrest people.
Look, chapped lips are quite painful, Sajila, and it's quite very difficult to concentrate on, on
the burglars,
criminals,
yeah.
if you've got sore lips. Do you think so, Francis?
Yeah, I think it's... I'm going to be honest with you, I think this is a great use of police funds.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. Because what is going to strike fear into the heart of the criminal community than a clown car turning up to try and arrest you?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty scary.
It is.
Because if you think the police are psychotic enough to drive around with something out of a noddy book,
yeah,
then you're going to think, well, what else will they do? They're unhinged. They're clearly unhinged.
Or maybe some of them might have taken acid. They see that car, have a flashback, collapse on the floor, makes them easier to arrest.
Yeah, no, I'm all for it. And I will be talking to Elliot Keck from the Taxpayers Alliance about that question later, and he'll probably give us a more sensible answer. Anyway, we're going to move on now to another question. This one is from Kate. Where is Kate? Hi, Kate. Hello. Hello.
Hello. Do you think France should apologise to Iran over the cartoons in Charlie Hebdo?
OK, so this is an interesting one. We did talk about this the other night on Headliners as well. So the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, which, as you know, is a sort of very caustic satirical magazine that often annoys a lot of people. It's really annoyed the Iranian regime this time, well, again, by publishing cartoons of their supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And Iran's foreign minister tweeted out, and this was what he said, the insulting and indecent act of a French publication in publishing cartoons against the religious and political authority will not go without an effective and decisive response. That sounds like a threat to me, Sajila.
It sounds very much like a threat. Oh, my God, come on, please, this is ridiculous. They get upset about a cartoon. They didn't get upset about years ago. I'm really showing my age now, not the 9 o'clock news. Ayatollah, don't come any closer. Right?
They missed that one.
Yeah, they missed that one. It's like, really, you're getting upset about a cartoon. And also, it's our job, it's a satirist's job to critique leaders, and what they're doing there is appalling. So you haven't got a leg to stand on, mate. But they've threatened. That's the interesting thing. So now anything happens, we directly know where that's come from.
Yes. Well, of course, but they have threatened. It's because it's in Iran. It's illegal to criticise the
But that's
leader.
in Iran.
But that's in Iran. So it's that idea of trying to impose rules on other people. But we had this before. Do you remember when there was a German satirist who made a video about President Erdogan of Turkey, implying that he copulated with goats, right? And I'm not saying if that's true or not. I don't know. But the thing is, the satirist did that, and then Erdogan called on Angela Merkel and said, I want this person extradited or arrested. And then, interestingly, Angela Merkel actually considered it for a while, but then it was sort of sorted out. Why don't we just say, look, it's legal in this country to take the mick out of politicians and leaders, so, back off?
Well, I think it was a bit of a surprise to me, because he seemed always like such a nice guy.
What, the Supreme Leader of Iran?
Yeah, it's really tolerant. Like, look at the Salman Rushdie thing. You know what
All
I mean?
of that, and
He's
calling for the
No,
wholesale
that wasn't
eradication
him.
of
That
Israel.
was the one before.
Oh, the one before. Right,
I don't think the new one's been that good. No, it was the one before.
Yeah, the one before, and this one, well, you know, if your scarf slips, he very kindly tries to tell you how you should wear your scarf. So you know, yeah.
Total diva. I mean, what is she like? The thing is, so what do you think? What do you think is going to happen here? I mean, will France capitulate to this?
On my show, we actually interviewed an Iranian historian called Ali Ansari, and he actually said that what's very interesting about the Iranian regime is this chap, I can never pronounce his name because I'm a bit...
Just call him the Ayatollah.
Right, the Ayatollah, right? He actually sees himself as a direct representative from God.
As the Pope does.
Yeah, exactly.
But the Pope doesn't send threats to the country.
No, only undercover, Andrew.
And the royal family.
Yeah.
Don't they as well?
No, they don't think they're God.
No, don't they think they're descendants, like God appointed them?
What, you mean the divine right of kings? That's going back a few centuries at this point.
Yeah.
And ever since Harry, I mean, that
Harry's proved it, yeah.
But what's interesting about the Ayatollah's position is that it's actually haram. That is completely goes against Islam. So
in what sense?
Because it is haram to say that you are a direct descendant of God and therefore you should be allowed to rule.
I don't think it's even that much. I think it's just that he's annoyed that someone's takes the mickey out.
No, but yeah, but I do think you have to make a point. But there's the same thing with a cartoon. It's like I've never understood why Muslims get, and I speak for them because obviously I've been elected by my people to speak for everybody. But I just think that you're getting upset about cartoon, but that suggests that the cartoon of the prophet is actually higher place than God, and nobody is higher than God. If you're going to go through the religious kind of thing, and what you just said is absolutely correct, because like you're asking us to worship an ordinary man, and that's not Islamic.
Exactly.
Absolutely
this
not.
isn't even about the cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, which of course. We all agree that back in 2015 the cartoonists were massacred for drawing that, and obviously that's absolutely outrageous and should never have been tolerated. But this is about a man. This is about
It's a man. It's a man. It's a man. An ordinary man.
About that. And this absolutely incredible arrogance to come in
and it's vile. It's a vile man. It should be. I mean, I think that as vile as he is, I guess I won't be going to Iran anytime soon.
I don't think they watch the show.
Yeah. It's a shame. It's a really beautiful country. Got lovely food and everything. But yeah, I think as vile as he is, that they were asking people to submit cartoons as bad as they could about him, and I think they're trying to make a point. But I'm not a fan of Charlie Hebdo, but I also think, you know, if that's what you're doing, it's not the responsibility of someone to get in touch from another country and say, look, you know, we don't like this.
And of course, in Iran at the moment, the regime is not popular, right? This is the thing. Like, they are really going to be anxious at the moment because obviously there's going to be change there, isn't there? There already is.
Well, there has to be. And what was really heartening over the previous months is to see the groundswell of support from around the world, but also the fact that it was this movement led by women challenging this autocratic, horrific regime. And you could see the real fear in these men's faces. As
opposed to the courage of those women. I mean, these women, you know, tearing their veils off and burning them and dancing in the street. And they can be serious. Well, people being killed.
I know. And they are sacrificing those. I cannot stress how brave and wonderful they are. And they are inspiring to all of us. You know, they've been cutting their hair. You know, I wanted to sort of show solidarity, so I got a trim. But
it's the least you could have done.
It's the least I could do, I felt.
You're braver in a way.
I am braver in a way, because I'm doing it here in the West, where you know people judge you for the way you look. But yeah, I mean, it's an incredible story. Yeah, it is incredible. Take the humour out of it. I cannot, you know. They are just incredible women, and the world should be supporting them right now. And they are out there risking their lives. And it all set off from that one, you know, woman who basically died under. And this happens all the time. And this happens all the time. They jumped up charges. They just arrest you. They arrest other members of your family. It's appalling.
And she died in custody, of course.
Yeah.
And this was the morality police, so-called morality police, that arrested her. And it's got to stop, and it probably will. But anyway, we've got to move on to another question now. This is from Peter. Where do we have Peter? Hi, Peter.
Hi, Happy New Year.
And you.
Now, should all children up to the age of 18 be forced to study maths?
Now, we'll all know about this because Rishi Sunak this week has said this in his New Year statement, that he wants, in one form or another, people to study mathematics to the age of 18. I mean, I would have been in a lot of trouble if I'm not good at maths. But what do you make of that? Do you think it's possibly enforceable?
This is what happens when you get a nerd in charge of the country. It's what happens. You can tell he loves maths. You can tell it. And, you know, he wasn't bullied enough, right? This is what happens.
Of course he wasn't rich.
Exactly. A couple of dunkings in the toilet, he would have knocked some sense into him. Well, say what you like about Boris, he wouldn't have forced people to study maths until 18.
Well, look, I don't think it's going to happen particularly. But look, I mean, I have heard some mathematicians sort of saying, why the snobbery about maths? You know, people have been boasting about how rubbish they are at maths and how they would hate to have been forced. But no one boasts about being illiterate.
No.
You know? So
well, I have to say, going back, initially when this story broke out, I thought, oh gosh, you know, he's showing his South Asian side. He's probably, what it was probably a speech that he prepared for his kids to say, do better at maths and like be, you know, because that's what Asian parents are like. But then obviously mixed up the speeches. On paper, it looks good. Like, because I think, you know, being better at English and maths, that are...
No bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. And actually, he's probably thinking about the future in terms of future generations, you know, being in a stronger position to get, like, you know, work and obviously helping the economy. However, it kind of sticks in my throat a bit that a former Chancellor of the Exchequer who can't actually tally up his own figures, you know, is actually saying we need to learn maths.
I mean, I really don't think it's going to happen, you know, because the idea of making it compulsory into that age, I mean, you've already got the basic skills, haven't you, by 16?
But there's a far deeper point going on here. As a former teacher, I used to teach primary school. I used to teach last year at primary school maths in particular. And one of the things when I retrained to be a primary school teacher was I realised that I was never actually taught maths. In this country, we're not taught maths properly. What we are taught is a series of sequences that we repeat in order to get a right answer. But most people actually don't understand what is going on beneath the surface.
So you think actually Sunak's got a point?
No, what I'm actually saying is we don't teach maths in this country properly.
Right.
And what we actually need to do is actually teach children mathematics. To get them to really understand what it means to add, to subtract, to multiply.
OK.
Instead of what we do now.
I don't know, Francis, I've got a calculator.
Can I ask a question, Francis, if you're a teacher, and if you know... Do you know what a logarithm book was for?
No.
No.
Yeah, we had logarithm books. Does anybody remember this?
Yeah. What was that?
What the hell was that?
Oh, we didn't have that. We had
nothing.
Speaking of maths, that sort of robot thing. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're not going to do it. We're going to move on now to a question from Lyle. Where is Lyle? Hi.
Hi, Andrew. Harry's new book, Prince Harry's new book.
Yes.
Do you think this could lead the revelations and lead to the collapse of the monarchy?
Collapse of the monarchy? Well, I mean, so the book is called Spare. I haven't read it. I'm not going to read it, to be honest. Apparently, they have to sell 1.7 million copies to break even because the publisher has invested so much, and I can't see that happening, can you? But anyway, this is actually... there's been an article. This Catherine Mayer, who's a royal analyst and biographer of King Charles, thinks that this will completely destroy our system of constitutional monarchy. That seems a bit overblown. I mean, it's the Spare. It's the ginger one no one likes. I mean, it doesn't really matter. He doesn't really matter, does he? I don't know.
Look, the thing is that it's making headlines and waves around the world.
Yeah.
The reality is, it's doing a tremendous amount of damage to the royal family because he's leaking all these stories, and we don't know if they're true or if they're not.
So there is that. There's also the security risk because, you know, he boasted that he killed 25 Taliban soldiers. For a start, you've got the Ministry of Defence coming out and people, soldiers saying, we don't do that. We don't boast about people we kill in war. There's that. We don't have notches on the rifle butt. But also, that creates a security risk now within the royal family.
It sounds like something you'd say to your mates in a weather speech, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, mate, killed 25 of them. They didn't stand a chance. Bosh, bosh, bosh.
His ghostwriter needs to be sacked, right?
I don't know. I'm going to hold my opinion until I've actually read the book.
You're going to read it?
No, I've ordered it. It's coming.
OK.
And the reason is because I think this a convenient leak to the press from Spain. I don't believe that. I don't buy that at all.
Well,
I think obviously one of the royal family had managed to... Because they've been drip-feeding it us every day, and I think it's a ploy to stop people from buying the book because you're giving it... But I also think it's taken out of context. So I want to read it before I make a comment. And I actually don't think it's the end of the monarchy. No. I just think what he's done is showing his life under very, you know, obvious circumstances. His mother died in front of him. He's waiting to walk behind a coffin. You know, he's opening up the door. It's like the Wizard of Oz. He's opening, you know, he's basically pulled back the curtain and we can see what the royal family's about.
That's why a lot of people have sympathy, is the fact that, you know, he was so young when his mother died in these tragic circumstances and he was forced to go out there in public and not behave like a normal little boy would have to behave. On the other hand, people are a bit annoyed, I think, that he's using the book and would have been writing the book while his grandmother was dying, and it's sort of attacking attacking the family that he came from.
This is a family. Like, I mean, okay, they're the royal family, but they are the royal. They're their own family. It's like, why are we all getting involved? And it's like we spent so much pages, programmes, every single show I see.
He'll be loving that though.
You know,
Yeah,
of course.
But
right?
he got paid £14.8 million for that book, and I'm going to say this: if someone gave me that money, I'd throw my family under the bus as well. There you go, Granny. Under the 163, darling. I'm off to Monaco. See you later, love.
Fair enough. Right, an insight into Francis's soul there. We've got a question now from Catherine. Where is Catherine?
Here. Should teachers be banned from using sarcasm?
I mean, that sounds like a sarcastic question, doesn't it? This is apparently Skegness Academy in Lincolnshire. They basically issued a guide to the staff members and they said don't use sarcasm. Why?
As a former teacher, can I just say, we need sarcasm.
Of course.
We desperately need sarcasm. It's the kind of same thing as being racist against the French. Do you know, it's kind of
essential.
It's an essential. It's a safety valve for society. You know,
Okay.
it's just you let off a little bit of steam.
You do need something because you need to. You know, I suppose you can use sarcasm in a particularly horrible way.
Yeah.
You know, you can't like say to a child, "Oh, you're a very intelligent little boy, aren't you?" That would be a terrible thing to do. But you've done that.
Yeah. I remember I had one boy who was very naughty. Right, his name was Louis. Lovely lad, but very naughty. I remember once he was making a bit of an effort for one day.
Right.
And he came up to me and he went to me, "Mr. Foster, do you think I'll get the Good Behaviour Award for this week?" And I just looked at him. I went, "Don't be silly, Louis." And then he went, "Sir," and then we cracked up, and then he went off and then smashed something up, you know?
Okay. What do you think, Sajid? I mean, surely...
I think, no, this is getting really silly now. Sarcasm, come on, what is it? I mean, maybe we shouldn't be sarcastic because, you know, we might make the kids so upset that they're going to pull the cotton wool off their bodies and they'll be exposed to all this terrible pain.
So you're all for the tough love?
I'm all about tough love. I think bring back the slipper.
Wow. Wow. Corporal punishment, heard it here first. Anyway, we're going to go to a break now, but after the break on Free Speech Nation, author Kara Dansky will join us from America to discuss an important Court of Appeal ruling concerning single-sex bathrooms at schools. Don't go anywhere. Woo!
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. The US Court of Appeals ruled last week that separating school bathrooms based on biological sex is constitutional and does not violate Title IX, which prohibits sex-based discrimination. The ruling, which could have major implications in the states, held that a Florida school board didn't violate any equal protection rights when it prohibited transgender student Drew Adams from using the boys' bathrooms at Allen D. Nease High School. Joining me from Washington, D.C. to discuss this ruling, I'm delighted to welcome the author Kara Dansky, who wrote The Abolition of Sex, How the Transgender Agenda Harms Women and Girls. Good evening, Kara.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Now, Kara, I want to ask you first about this ruling. How do you feel about it?
It's a great ruling. This is the first time a U.S. federal court of appeals has ruled that schools may maintain single-sex bathrooms consistent with, as you say, Title IX of the Civil Rights Act and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So it's a really great decision.
And what will the later ramifications of this decision be? I mean, this seems to be a debate that is really sort of kicking off over in the States. Do you think other states will follow suit, or is this something that will now apply throughout the country?
So currently, the only states that are affected by the ruling are the states that exist within the 11th Circuit, which are Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. However, it is very likely that a case like this will go up to the Supreme Court because 3 courts of appeals have ruled that it's permissible for schools to maintain bathrooms based on a student's gender identity. And this conflicts with that. And that creates what is known in the states as a circuit split. And that's one of the factors that the Supreme Court considers in deciding whether to take a case. So it's very likely that one of these cases will make its way up to the Supreme Court. And we should hear relatively soon, within the next couple of years at least, what the Supreme Court thinks about whether schools can maintain single-sex spaces consistent with the law and with the Constitution.
It strikes me that a lot of this has come about because of a confusion between the definition of sex and the definition of gender identity, almost as though the two things are being conflated. But surely, isn't the law quite clear about this, that biological sex is something that is real and is necessary to preserve sex-based rights?
So we had a case in 2020 from the Supreme Court called Bostock versus Clayton County. And what the Supreme Court decided in that case is that it is employment discrimination, unlawful employment discrimination on the basis of sex for an employer to discriminate against a person on the basis of either sexual orientation or transgender status. It did not tell us what transgender status might mean. So that was decided in June of 2020. Immediately upon taking office, the President Biden, in January of 2021, announced to the country and to all federal agencies that everyone now had to start redefining the word sex to include gender identity for all purposes, which in my view is a complete misreading and misconstruing of the decision in Bostock versus Clayton County. I do not like the outcome of Bostock versus Clayton County, and we could discuss why. But even so, the Biden administration has been essentially lying to the American people since January of 2021 about what that decision says. And yes, absolutely, we are seeing across the country a complete reconfiguring of the category sex to include the nebulous, vacuous phrase gender identity by the Biden administration in complete contravention to accepted standards of law.
It reminds me of our National Health Service over here. There was a situation where they implemented single-sex accommodation in hospitals, but interior memos from the NHS said that they actually meant gender identity, but they were going to use the word sex so the public didn't get confused. But surely we need some sort of clarity on this. I mean, is there anything that feminist campaigners in America like yourself can do to make this clear, not just in terms of the public consciousness, but also in terms of legislation?
So we do this frequently. So I am the president of the U.S. chapter of Women's Declaration International, and we have filed some court briefs before the federal judiciary explaining the importance of maintaining sex as a discrete category, explaining the importance of the category female to mean exclusively women and girls. And we have repeatedly written to Congress. The Congress is currently considering something called the Equality Act. Our version of the Equality Act is very different from the UK's version of the Equality Act. I just want to make that clear. In the UK, my understanding is the Equality Act does maintain sex as a discrete category, which is great. Our version of the Equality Act would completely annihilate that and redefine the word sex to include the phrase gender identity for all purposes under U.S. civil rights law, and that's disastrous. And we have worked very hard to communicate with various members of Congress at as much as we can since 2015 to explain why this would be a disaster for American women and girls. The U.S. chapter of Women's Declaration International also in January of 2022 sent every single member of Congress a copy of my book, The Abolition of Sex. So they know that redefining sex to include gender identity is really bad for women and girls, especially and including lesbians. And it's really bad because it denies the material reality of biological sex, which is a disaster for all of us.
I mean, you are right to point out that the UK Equality Act does protect sex, not gender. But a lot of activist groups who are instructing people in schools and the police and that kind of thing deliberately misinterpret that as gender identity, not sex. And they conflate that deliberately in order to advance the agenda. But there are such serious ramifications for this, particularly when it comes to, let's say, prisons. And I know that in America there have been a number of examples of male-bodied individuals, even people who have committed sexual offences, being transferred to women's prisons. What's happening there at the moment in relation to that story?
So as far as I'm concerned, this should absolutely be a national scandal. And I am appalled at the U.S. media for not making it one. You're right. As you say, there are convicted male rapists and murderers being housed in women's prisons. And this is all over the country. I don't want people to be confused and think that this is only happening in, lefty California. It is happening in California, and it's a disaster. And it's happening in Washington state, but it's also happening in places like Illinois, Kentucky, New Jersey. It's happening all over the country. We know from hearing from women inside prisons that women have been raped, women have been sexually assaulted. They are standing watch over each other in order to protect each other from the men who are invading the women's prisons. We know that there are 2 women who got impregnated in a New Jersey prison because of men being housed in the women's prison on the basis of their so-called gender identity. And what I think is really important about that is to note that because we know that those inmates impregnated female inmates, we know that they are not any form of women. They are not trans women. They are not transgender women. We are just talking about men.
And this is the point, isn't it? That no one's saying that trans people have an inherently more predatory nature. What they're saying is gender self-identification will obviously be open to exploitation by people with a nefarious agenda.
So when I talk about this stuff, I'm just really interested in talking about men and women as discrete sex classes. And for me, it's not helpful to acknowledge that there's some third category of people who are neither male or female. And so every single person on the face of the planet is either female or male. And I just don't accept the rest of it.
So your view is that we should effectively just prioritise biology, particularly when it comes to prisons. And I suppose you would extend that to, well, sporting events are the obvious example. And that kind of thing, hasn't that led to more and more people being aware of the problem? Because when you see someone like the swimmer Leah Thomas standing on the top of a podium, towering over the other candidates, that surely, it's difficult to sort of explain that away.
So Leah Thomas woke up a lot of Americans. So thank you, Will Thomas. Yes, I absolutely think that making these cases very obvious is very important. Part of the reason I do think it's so important to focus on biology is that it's not a mystery as to why women in this country were not allowed to vote until 1920. It's not a mystery as to why women were not allowed to serve on juries or have our own credit cards or divorce our own husbands. there's a reason that women have been treated horrifically throughout at least American society for hundreds of years. And that is not anything to do with identity. It's not anything to do with preferred pronouns. It's because we are women. It is because we are adult human females. And I'm not particularly interested in now turning around and pretending as though that category of human beings doesn't exist.
Why is it you think that people are so frightened to speak out about this particular issue? Why is it that you think, everyone knows that no human being has ever changed sex? And therefore, that is a fact that should just generally be acknowledged surely by everyone in authority. And that does have ramifications for the way in which you legislate in certain areas. Why are people not speaking out more about this? Well, when you tell people about the prison situation or the sports situation, most people are outraged.
Yeah, and I think it's true that still huge swaths of the American population have absolutely no idea. How that's possible is a mystery to me, because I've been tapped into this since 2014. But I do think a lot of people really don't know. Maybe just people aren't paying attention. And you're right that once people are made aware of it, they are absolutely outraged. I do just want to say that when we talk about people, if we're talking about ordinary average Americans, I think it's fair to say that most people don't know. If we're talking about the leaders of the Democratic Party, which is the party to which I have always belonged and still belong, they know. And the Democratic Party, my party leaders, have been completely captured by this. And it's very frustrating. But I will also say that the Republican Party has been either unable or unwilling to stand up and take a stand against it. I'd be curious to know how that plays out in the UK. I do follow and I watch what the Labour Party is doing, and I watch what your Labour leader has to say on this topic. But the more conservative party, at least in my country, is not taking a stand against it either.
No, that's right. I mean, here at the Labour Party, of course they are fully aware of the situation, but Keir Starmer has struggled to define what a woman is, as have many members of the Labour Party, but also members of the Conservative Party. And like you say, it's not the case that they can't be aware of this, because surely it should be their job to do some basic research. In Scotland, with Nicola Sturgeon's SNP, when feminists have said that there are serious consequences to housing men in women's prisons, etc., she says that those arguments have no merit. She just dismisses it. Now, can it be the case that people at that level of authority simply don't understand the issues? Or is it that they're being disingenuous? And if so, why?
I think they're being disingenuous. I think in my country, the Democrats are being disingenuous because they're paid to be so. There's a tremendous amount of money behind this movement. And when I say this movement, I mean the movement to abolish sex and enshrine gender identity throughout the law. And it is my belief that the Democratic Party has been bought and paid for and is going to keep continuing to push this until someone holds them account. Like I said, I don't think the Republicans are willing or able at this point to hold them to account. My even bigger frustration is with the media, because our media has also been completely captured. And if we could shine some light, and if we could have an honest conversation about what's going on in the American mainstream media, I think average, ordinary Americans across the political spectrum would be absolutely outraged. I hear from rank and file Democrats every day on social media, in my inbox. Rank and file Democrats, traditional leftist liberals in America, are absolutely outraged, but we cannot get a voice in most mainstream media outlets.
OK, well, lots to think about there. Cara, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And after the break on Free Speech Nation, historian David Oldroyd-Bolt will be here to discuss the significance of Pope Benedict XVI, who passed away on New Year's Eve. See you in a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Later in the show, I'll be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel, Sajila Kershi and Francis Foster. We're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So if you've got any kind of problem at all, just email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk and we will do our best to answer your issues. Former Pope Benedict XVI passed away on New Year's Eve at the age of 95. Born in Germany as Joseph Ratzinger, Benedict was head of the Catholic Church between April 2005 and February 2013, when he resigned to be replaced by Pope Francis. Benedict then chose to be known as Pope Emeritus until his death. Joining me now to discuss the legacy of this hugely significant figure, I'm delighted to welcome the historian and journalist David Oldroyd-Bolt. Thank you for joining us, David.
Good evening, Andrew. Thank you.
Could you perhaps give us some understanding of his background, Benedict's background, because, you know, he was a very academic individual, wasn't he?
Well, that's the first and most important thing to understand about Pope Benedict, about Joseph Ratzinger as he was that he was really an academic. He was a philosopher. He was a full professor at the age of only 31, which is incredibly young by academic standards. He began his career at the University of Bonn. He then moved on, and in 1968, at Tübingen, was when he really started to move from being what was considered on the liberal side of the church into being seen as more of a conservative.
Yes.
Because this is the time in 1968 when all around Europe there was student ferment. There was a famous événement in Paris where the students ripped up the cobblestones outside the Sorbonne. All across Europe and America, in fact, there were student protests. There was the Democratic National Convention of 68 where students in support of RFK rioted, essentially. So this was a time at which Pope Benedict started to think of himself as changing in his churchmanship, in his approach to the church, and then this solidified later on in his academic appointments. But I think it is important to note that he always considers himself really to be not a modernist, but on the more liberal side. He was certainly no ossified traditionalist. And indeed,
that will surprise people.
Well, indeed, during the process of Vatican II, the Second Vatican Council, he was one of the advisors who was in favour of some of the more liberalising aspects. Now, of course, when he was Pope later on, he reiterated that that did not mean that traditional practices could not be engaged in, such as the celebration of the old rite of the Latin Mass. It's important to note that much against popular view it was still, after Vatican II, perfectly permissible to celebrate the Mass in Latin. It's just a lot of people decided not to. There was what's called a Novus Ordo, a new order of service, which was in Latin. But the difference was that after the Second Vatican Council, after the 1960s, there was more participation by the congregation, whereas the old rite, which under Summorum Pontificum of 2007 was once again permitted to be used, there was more of a focus on collective prayer, with the priest standing facing ad orientem to the east of the altar, and all of the congregation facing with him. It is always him in the Catholic Church. Just this idea that there was less sort of audience participation.
People forget how sort of radical Vatican II was in many ways, but it's interesting to hear you talk about a liberal side of the Church versus a conservative side of the Church, and Benedict's sort of journey along those lines. A lot of people will be surprised by that because, of course, surely isn't the appeal of the Catholic Church its traditionalism, the fact that it will always be conservative?
Well, it's one of those things from the great Catholic novel Brideshead Revisited, where Charles Ryder, the main character, says, I thought the thing about Catholics was everybody says they're supposed to know what they believe. Well, the thing is that, yes, Catholics do know what they believe in the broadest, most general sense, but in any congregation of 2 billion believers, in any hierarchy with thousands and thousands and thousands of priests, bishops, cardinals, and then the Pope at the top, you're going to have a variance of view. Of course. And I think it's an important thing to note that in the Catholic Church there is and always has been, right from the foundation of the Church, really in the 2nd century AD, there has always been debate about the nature of Christ. There's always been debate about the nature of the service, about the role of women. It's just that debate can be seen with an historical perspective to warp and wane, and therefore it can seem that there is, over 2,000 years, only one direction of travel.
Yeah, there's an impression of the Catholic Church that, you know, you've got the catechism and those are the rules and you go there and look at that and that's it. Actually, there are always debates flourishing within the Church.
There always are, and there always should be. Otherwise, you need intellectual vitality in order to ensure that the Church does not ossify and become totally irrelevant. That is not to say, however, and this is where Benedict would be seen as conservative, that the Church should change itself to be relevant. Unlike, say, the Anglican Church, which seems to have a preoccupation with this nowadays.
Yes.
Benedict's whole idea was that the Church is a rock, and that people cleave to it in times of unsteadiness.
And while you get other churches, such as the Anglican Church, but also even sort of the Baptist Church in America, sort of tagging on to these very sort of new ideologies about identity politics, it does feel like the Catholic Church, for however progressive Francis is, relatively speaking, will be immune to those kind of developments. Do you think that's right?
I don't think it is fair to say he's immune. And I would state that, yes, or I would aver that Pope Francis is, in this respect, more traditional than many of his critics would give him credit for. There has been talk in the German Church particularly about the possibility of divorcees being able to remarry and take communion, and possibly even that married men might become priests, or rather that priests might be able to marry. Married men can become priests through the ordinariate. But I think the point to aver here is that the Catholic Church is much less likely than other churches like the Episcopalian Church, like the Anglican Church, to go along with that, simply because of the size of it. There are 2 billion Catholics, and though it is a totally hierarchical organisation, there is a great, I suppose, respect for debate, and respect also for the validity of tradition, unless it's changed at something like a Vatican Council, of which there have only been 2, of course. That's not to say there haven't been other ecumenical councils. But I think that Benedict was particularly interesting in this regard because he saw the great crime as relativism. He didn't think of politics so much as he did against relativism versus an idea of truth. And indeed, in one of his most famous quotes, he said that the problem with relativism is essentially that it translates or brings relative ideas and objective opinions to the status of truth, and in that you get totalitarianism. So this was his great preoccupation. And I think he looked at the world around him after the 1968 Evenement and going into the 90s and 2000s when he was head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith and then Pope, and thought that this is something that he as Pope could really do.
Yes.
He could stop this idea that everything was up for grabs, that everything was totally and utterly irrelevant in the sense of truth, and that it only mattered what you believed, and that there were, in fact, universal truths. And he always brought this back to the figure of Jesus Christ. That the belief in Jesus Christ was the central rock upon which Christianity was built, or rather the belief in Christ's divinity and resurrection, and that cleaving to those eternal truths is what brought us together as a species.
And do you think that will be partly his legacy? Because at the moment it feels to me that emphasis on relativism is more important than ever, just because there are multiple truths now, multiple ways of knowing. That's very fashionable. But if the Catholic Church can cleave to that idea, to Benedict's idea of relativism, then maybe things can improve?
Well, I think it's one of the things that, as a Catholic, you can actually take some comfort in, despite the fact that there are parts of the Church that would dispute this, and there are... And it's too short a time to go into this, but it's not to say that the whole Catholic Church believes absolutely in the idea of absolutism versus relativism. But I think overall it does. And I think the thing that Benedict's legacy will be for all of us is that he showed the philosophical and intellectual validity of this point of view. When the whole of the intellectual establishment really around the Western world was, from the 60s onwards, saying, well, actually, there is no such thing as a truth. There is no such thing as, real objectivism. There is only this relative idea that depends on circumstances and context. I think the fact that this man was, for the best part of 50 years, there and respected as an intellectual, as a philosopher, and then as a pope, and averring this constantly, will be the greatest legacy that he leaves to us.
David Aldrop-Bolt, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And after the break, author and cultural commentator Frank Furedi will join us to discuss the actors who are suing for sexual abuse over an Oscar-winning film made in 1968. Don't go away.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there. Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Actors Leonard Whiting and Olivia Hussey are suing at Paramount Pictures for sexual abuse over a scene in the 1968 film Romeo and Juliet. The actors are now in their 70s, but they were 16 and 15 at the time of the shoot, and they claim that the director Franco Zeffirelli encouraged them to film a nude scene. Whiting and Hussey are looking for damages of more than $500 million. because of the suffering they've experienced and the money made by the film. So joining me to discuss this is the writer and critic Frank Furedi. Good evening, Frank. Frank, I want to ask you first about this. There is some sort of moral ambiguity here, isn't there? Just simply by dint of the age of the actors when they were involved in the film. They were underage. So does that not make this a clear-cut case that this should not have happened?
Well, it doesn't, because I remember when the film came out, I'm old enough to know students, school children, who watched the film in schools. It was shown widely in many, many schools doing English lessons about Shakespeare. And in those days, nobody had any problems with the film. The film is a beautiful film. It's very subtly done. There's nothing ambiguous about it. The only problem with the film is that from our perspective, people like the guys that run Hollywood argue that it should never be made. And the problem is that they don't just simply say sort of that it should never have been made. They're telling us that because it should not have been made, it now constitutes some kind of a cultural crime for which somebody has got to pay. And it seems to me that what we're trying to do is essentially, through the process of grievance archaeology, try to find scenes from films in the past, which some people are uncomfortable with, and use that as a way of creating a kind of return to the beginning Me Too movement, where the Me Too movement goes back to the distant past and finds new targets to criminalize. And I don't think there's any ambiguity about it. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the film. There's nothing pornographic about it. It's a very gentle scene, in fact. And I just know, talking to parents at the time, they had, these were good parents, who looked after their kids. They had no problems about allowing their kids to watch that so-called nude scene.
The argument, though, Frank, would be that because the actors were underage, they could not possibly consent to being nude in the film. And given that the scene itself, it has a sexual basis to it, then this is different than, say, the nudity of, say, in Roman Polanski's Macbeth, where you have a young boy naked, but there's no sexual element to that scene, so it's a different thing. Do you accept that point?
I don't. I think that the question of consent is something that is raised time and time again. So some people argue that it's wrong that a Jewish family insists that their boy should become circumcised because the child never consented to that. Or they will say that it's totally wrong that somebody, a Catholic child, is forced to go into a Jesuit seminary because the child didn't consent to that. The point is that parents do a lot of things to which children don't consent because obviously they're underage, they're not adults who are in a position to make informed consent. And that happens all the time within the filmmaking industry. So it seems to me to kind of pick out this one area for special consideration is utterly wrong, because the logic of that is that anything that children did not consent to in any domain of human experience can become a target for claims making, for trying to get money out of that.
My understanding is that all of this has come about because the statute of limitations has been suspended and therefore action can be taken at this point. But to what extent do you think that the recent legacy of Me Too, and particularly how that has impacted Hollywood, has made these kinds of cases more likely?
Well, there's been a convergence. I don't know if you heard, but for example, Molly Ringwood, who was one of the stars in that famous film, The Breakfast Club, wrote a series of articles in the New Yorker saying that she thought the film should not have been made. It has certain abusive elements to it. She's not actually claiming any money in her case. But I think what's interesting about her statement on this is that she's basically saying that the kind of values that the Me Too movement stands for today should become retrospective. We got to kind of go back and look at material in the past and judge them in light of the Me Too criterion, which I think is extremely troublesome, because essentially what we're doing is we're almost introducing a new culture of retrospective censorship, where we kind of retrospectively go back and we clean up films. We basically find there are certain pictures that needs to be somehow censored. I don't know if you remember that very famous picture of Jean-Paul Sartre, where he's there, of Camus, Albert Camus, smoking a cigarette. And in many, many places now the cigarette has been taken out, so the poor guy is just sort of standing there or sitting there like that. And we begin to do that with cartoons and gradually with great films, great pieces of art. And I do think that it's bad enough when the Me Too movement incites censorship in the here and now. I think it's even worse when it tries to do that with the incredibly important works of art in the past.
So you see this very much as a continuation of the other trend that we have seen of people attempting to problematise films that were made many, many years ago and even take certain scenes out of films and that kind of thing. Is that right?
Exactly. I think it's a way of basically saying that I've got a right, because of my sensibility, to decide what that film should look like. Not the director, not the artistic producers, but me, the censor, is going to have the final say. But there's also one additional element in this. You see, in Hollywood, there's now a group of individuals who are making a lot of money, essentially by going around, that if you think you've been abused, you think you've been traumatized, call us up and we'll go and launch a lawsuit on your behalf. And I think there's going to be a lot more cases like this, because what you have here is the convergence of censorship, Me Tooism, identity politics on the one hand, and money-making on the other hand. So it's a powerful combination.
I'm going to have to stop you at that point because we have run out of time, but thank you so much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it. That is it for the first hour. Plenty still to come tonight. After the break, I'm going to be talking about the censorship, which is crippling the academic world. And more questions, of course, from our wonderful audience. Don't go away.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, including more questions from our wonderful studio audience, and we'll hear from the Taxpayers Alliance. But let's get a news update first from Aaron Armstrong.
Good evening, I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has indicated he is willing to address nurses' demands for more money and has declined to rule out reopening this year's pay deal. Speaking to the BBC, Rishi Sunak accepted the NHS is under enormous pressure, but suggested much of it was down to the pandemic. Now, it's understood strikes will go ahead as planned this month, despite Mr Sunak's comments earlier. The Royal College of Nursing have urged Number 10 to meet the union halfway in its demand for a 19% pay rise. The Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says Labour couldn't afford that either.
I'm afraid I did have to say to the nurses, however much I totally sympathise with their pay claim, I would kind of, on all honesty, Camilla, say if I was in government today, I'd be able to give them 19%. But we did say we would sit down and negotiate. I think that's what the government should do.
Meanwhile, the Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, told GB News she agrees with the Prime Minister that although the NHS is facing undeniable pressure this winter, there are mitigating circumstances.
We're seeing a twindemic of both COVID and flu. We're seeing over 50% increase in the number of patients in with flu at the moment. That has a knock-on effect if beds aren't available for A&E, which leads to the long waits, which you describe, and then it has a knock-on effect on ambulances being stuck at A&E trying to unload their patients.
Now let's turn to a developing story in Brazil. Supporters of the former far-right president Jair Bolsonaro have invaded Congress, the Supreme Court, and they've surrounded the presidential palace. The dramatic scenes in the capital, Brasilia, come just a week after the new president, Lula da Silva's inauguration. Bolsonaro's supporters, who are refusing to accept that he lost the election, are calling for military intervention. It draws parallels with the January the 6th storming of the US Capitol following Donald Trump's defeat. President Lula is currently on an official visit in the state of Sao Paulo. Russia claims it's killed more than 600 Ukrainian soldiers in an attack in the east of the country. Its defence ministry says the missile strike was revenge for Ukraine's attack on Russian barracks in a Moscow-controlled part of Donetsk on New Year's Eve that led to the deaths of at least 89 Russian troops. Moscow has yet to provide evidence of the attack. Ukraine has rejected the Kremlin's claim as propaganda. Further shelling took place in several parts of Ukraine shortly after Russia ended its self-declared ceasefire to mark Orthodox Christmas. China's reopened its borders for the first time in 3 years after imposing strict travel restrictions for almost the whole of the pandemic. Incoming travellers will now no longer need to quarantine, but they will still need proof of a negative PCR test taken within 48 hours of travelling. China recently dismantled its zero-COVID policy, which included some of the tightest restrictions, including frequent testing and mass lockdowns. Some 2 billion trips are expected over the Chinese New Year this month. Hundreds of people have been protesting in central London in solidarity with anti-government demonstrations in Iran. Protesters marched through Trafalgar Square, earlier calling for justice. Yesterday, 2 men were executed by the Iranian regime for allegedly killing a member of the security forces during demonstrations last year. Human rights organisations have described their trial as a sham. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. But now it is back to the debate.
Culture warriors work very fast. In the space of about 10 years, they've managed to capture all of our major institutions, from academia to the arts, the corporate world to the public sector. Major publishing houses fear uprisings from their staff if they publish anything problematic. Television streaming services censor scenes that the new clergy don't approve of, or slap warnings on innocuous shows and films from yesteryear. But like I say, none of this would have been conceivable even a decade ago. This week, Simon Bird, star of the comedy show The In-Betweeners, said in an interview that the show wouldn't be made today. But we're not talking about the Black and White Minstrels here or The Birth of a Nation. We're talking about a sitcom which first aired in 2008. That was basically yesterday. As one anonymous wit put it on Twitter, Previous generations laughed at what their parents censored. This generation censors what their parents laughed at. But there's more at stake than just comedy and the arts more generally. The same kind of mentality that would see old comedies censored is also crippling the academic world. Today's students are receiving a sanitised form of education, one that patronises them and assumes that they are delicate and fragile and incapable of engaging with sensitive topics. And although some young people do fall into this category, it is only a minority, and it is a minority that will grow the more that people of my generation insist on coddling them. On last week's show, I spoke to Alex Moray from FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. We discussed the art history professor who had been sacked by Hamline University in Minnesota for showing a medieval image in class of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, this is a significant image in the history of Islamic art and is often a feature of such classes. It was shown for less than 10 minutes in the class. The professor had warned the students that it would be shown, and only one or two complained afterwards. Of course, any self-respecting institution of higher education would have told the complainants to stop wasting their time. But instead, it was decided that the decision to show the image was, quote, undeniably inconsiderate, disrespectful and Islamophobic, and the professor was sacked. The university claims that given that this academic was what they call an adjunct, in other words, a teacher not on permanent contract, this doesn't qualify as a sacking. Well, such pettifogging aside, we can surely all agree that it certainly doesn't qualify as a robust defence of academic freedom. But then academic freedom is no longer the priority for many institutions. Here's the rather chilling statement which the university has confirmed reflects its position, written by Hamline's Associate Vice President for Inclusive Excellence. Yes, that's actually a thing. We have learned over many years that knowledge can be shared in a multitude of responsible, thoughtful and respectful ways. Our response to the classroom event does not disregard or minimise the importance of academic freedom. It does state that respect, decency and appreciation of religious and other differences should supersede when we know that what we teach will cause harm. Since when does a work of art cause harm? I suppose if there was an earthquake in Florence, someone might end up being crushed by Michelangelo's David. But on the whole, the notion of harm or safety has absolutely nothing to do with art. The statement continues, academic freedom is very important, but it does not have to come at the expense of care and decency towards others. So there you have it. Academic freedom is not Hamline's priority. The university's priority, apparently, is making sure no students have their feelings hurt. That's not really a university then, is it? It's a creche. But what else should we expect from the Associate Vice President for Inclusive Excellence? I mean, he's not even the top dog in his field. If the Department of Inclusive Excellence has an Associate Vice President, then presumably it also has a Vice President and a President, and that's a lot of staff members for a department that is essentially pointless, and a lot of money to spend to turn your institution into a laughingstock. And I'm sure that the alumni who will have attended Hamline University before it was ideologically captured are probably going to have to stop writing those cheques unless things improve. And that kind of thing is already happening here in the UK. Last week, it was reported that the hedge fund manager Mark Hillary, Durham University's top donor, who has donated over £7 million to the university in the last 8 years, has said he will not give a penny more until they get their free speech house properly in order. He's giving money to the Free Speech Union instead, a much sounder investment. To return to the case of Hamline, it's worth noting that some academics have made the effort to explain to students and administrators why showing the image of Muhammad was not Islamophobic at all. Christine Gruber, an expert in Islamic art at the University of Michigan, wrote an article pointing out that the painting in question was hugely significant in the history of her subject. Others noted that not all Muslims object to showing the image of Muhammad, and his face appears in many examples of Islamic art throughout history. Mark Berkson, chair of the Department of Religion at Hamline University, wrote a letter to the Oracle, the student newspaper, in which he said the following: I believe that in the context of an art history classroom, showing an Islamic representation of the Prophet Muhammad, a painting that was done to honour Muhammad and depict an important historical moment, is not an example of Islamophobia. Labelling it this way is not only inaccurate, but also takes our attention off real examples of bigotry and hate. Surely that will have done the trick. No, that letter was actually removed from the publication's website only 2 days after it appeared. Because if rational arguments get in the way of your ideological narrative, it's best to scrub them out and pretend that they were never uttered. Now, I do hope that the professor in question is reinstated, and I hope that her story raises awareness of the ongoing erosion of higher education, something that many people continue to deny. The truth is that once any institution succumbs to an ideology, its function becomes secondary to the propagation of that ideology. And when it comes to education, that's potentially catastrophic for the intellectual health of future generations. So I want to ask you both about this. The Hamline University sacking the professor for showing this hugely significant work of art within Islamic art. This is an expert in Islamic art. It's not that they were trying to offend or upset people, and they're sacked. What's going on?
Did they show it during a maths class that Rishi has recommended?
No.
Because then I could see what the problem might have been.
Well, yes, you're surprising them with an image while they're doing algebra. That would be disrespectful. But showing the image during a class where they've actually not only warned them verbally, but warned them in written form that it will be shown, and it is an integral aspect of the subject.
Yeah, I mean, then really seriously, why are those kids there if that's not what they're there to study? I mean, these kind of stories really make me angry because everything in moderation, and I hate extremism of any kind. Like, so there is at the heart of this, there's good intentions, which is to make sure that there isn't kids aren't suffering Islamophobia, real cases of Islamophobia.
Right.
But in this instance, it is something that somebody else did many years ago, and everybody was OK about it then. Why are we not OK about it now?
Why are we conflating this academic who clearly is trying to teach their subject well, to the best of their ability, with the kind of person who would tear up a Quran or throw bacon at a mosque or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because then it dilutes the real stuff that's going on out there, and it is real, it is happening, and then it makes people say, oh, God, you know, people are going on about racism and Islamophobia, you know, race baiting and stuff. But that's what's happening. We were talking about this outside. Like, it just goes a whole circle, like, where there's real issues. Because we are so tippy-toeing around anyone's hurt feelings, and usually hurt feelings of those precious little... What do we should call them? I don't know. This new generation of you know, just brain-dead idiots who can't take anything. They can't take sarcasm. They can't take anything. Yeah. What purpose do you serve?
Or why go to university?
Mankind is over. We are just destined to just die on this planet with this horrible future that we're producing of these kids. Seriously.
Sajila's not happy.
Keep it light, Sajila. Sunday evening, people are sitting down with their tea, trying to have a little bit of...
Can I ask you, Francis? Because before I talked about that, I spoke about this story about the in-betweeners being changed. And it is all to do with offence. People are worried about offence, but particularly in comedy, but also in art. Isn't offence quite an interesting thing to happen?
But the thing is, you can't protect people from being offended. It's like protecting people from being made angry or frustrated or sad. That is just life. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how safe or anodyne or innocuous you make your university lecture or your comedy routine. It will always offend someone. There was a comedian at the Edinburgh Festival who was very clean, he's very, very woke, a very nice guy, very liberal, and he did a routine all about animals, and he said that pugs were ugly, right? This woman stood up in the middle, swore at him, said, I've got a pug, you're disgusting, and stormed out. So are we going to shut him down for saying that pugs are ugly?
Well, I mean, I like pugs, so I've got I'm on her side at that point. Well, look, you raised some very interesting points, Francis. We'll probably get onto that in a moment. Let's get some questions from our studio audience. We've got a question from Edward. Edward, hello.
Hi, Happy New Year.
And to you.
Do you think that we should put up some more statues of Greta Thunberg?
I don't think we can have enough statues of Greta Thunberg. I've asked for one in the GBNews studio, actually. And this is happened, by the way, you will have read about this story, because the students at a university were accused of greenwashing, spent almost £24,000 on a life-size statue of Greta. This was Winchester University, by the way. I mean, it's a lot of money, isn't it, Sajila? I mean, you know, I don't have anything against Greta, but it feels a bit like she's become almost a religious icon to some people.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, to be honest, like a couple of weeks ago, she totally owned Andrew Tate. And for that reason alone, I'm like, maybe Twitter could get together, do a fundraising thing, crowdfunding, and they'd probably get a lot more than 24,000. And then she can have a statue in a house.
But do we get
in
a
a house with solar powered? You know, sorry, no, I don't think £24,000 on a statue of an 18-year-old girl.
I think she's 20 now.
Oh, she's oh God, she's 20. We'll stop acting 18 then. Sorry, but I don't think. I mean, I think she does do some amazing things. You know, she's. You know, I'm not going to tag her off. I think anybody who does, I think is really. There's something wrong with them that she's a young girl.
Yeah.
But I don't think she's at a point where she needs a statue. That's just
what do you think, Francis? Because we were talking about this on Headliners the other night, and you know, my feeling was, you know, she's still very young. She's still 20. She doesn't really know her own mind yet. What if in 10 years' time she's an environmental complete denialist? She says nothing's going... I can't believe I said all that stuff, and maybe she'll go out and try and topple her own statue. That'd be quite interesting.
To me, Greta Thunberg is a bunking off school story that got out of hand. That's what it is. She was just like, oh, I'm worried about the environment, I don't want to go to school. Parents who indulge, her posh middle-class parents, going, Greta, you don't have to go to school. All of a sudden, she doesn't have to go to school. Everyone's listening to her. She's thinking, I'm on it. Yeah. And this is what's happened.
And to be fair, you know, lots of kids got off school because of these environmental protests.
Exactly.
And the schools didn't even care. They were like, yeah, OK, no, that's fair enough. You go off and protest. I'm glad that you're politically active. I mean, that's ridiculous. Of course kids want a day off school.
Of course
they find school boring.
But there's a far darker element to the Greta Thunberg case that nobody ever talks about. This is an autistic girl who was 15 when she rose to public prominence. She became one of the most famous people in the world at that time. And as the problem with having autism, one of the challenges these people face is it also comes a lot of the time with an anxiety disorder.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're making a young person who has not consented and does not understand what it is to be that globally famous, and you are putting them on a pedestal. You're effectively destroying their life.
I mean, Sajila, there is a point there. We were talking about consent earlier, but when it comes to, like, even actors, you know, young stars and stuff, well, she effectively became an international star at a very young age.
It's a good point, because it sort of ties in with the story before, which obviously they didn't have consent to that. And did Greta have consent? I mean, she couldn't have made that decision. No. And I do think a lot of it's her parents kind of guiding her career. And so it's a dilemma, that one.
She might end up resenting them and suing them.
Yeah, exactly. So let's not make the statue, because she, you know, it might be a bit early days. Yeah,
it might be.
Let's just let her work her through her problems first.
OK, well, look, we're going to get another question now from Mary. Mary, hello.
Do you think they would still make the In-Betweeners nowadays?
OK, we mentioned this earlier. So the In-Betweeners, the actor Simon Bird said in an interview with The Telegraph he doesn't think they would make a comedy like The In-Betweeners, even though it was only made in 2008. I think it finished in 2010. You know, what I found a bit maddening about this is, fine, when I watch a sitcom from, like, the 60s or 70s, I think, OK, you know, that's dated now. We don't joke about that kind of stuff anymore. I don't think it should be censored, by the way, because I think we're adults and we understand that things change over time. But what I'm saying is that we wouldn't make a thing like Mind Your Language or a sitcom of that kind today, or Curry and Chips or whatever, those old sitcoms. But this one, I mean, you watch it, and this was like, what, 15 years ago, max?
I know. It feels like it was only yesterday, because I'm struggling to kind of... he's a grown 40-year-old man. When did that happen?
To be fair, I think he was about 30 when he played the 18-year-old.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
They were a lot older.
You know where my position in terms of cancelling things, going back in the past and cancelling things. I think it's important for us to always be aware of our history, good, bad or ugly. But would it be made? No, it wouldn't, because we'll make something new and different. I mean, I'm not sure that's... because the issues they're talking about is like sexism, there was some
homophobia, particularly.
Was it homophobic? I didn't...
Well, no, but this was the interesting thing, because I remember when The In-Betweeners was on, and I remember thinking it was outdated at the time, because all of the characters had a real problem with gay people, including the minor characters. They just sort of casually slag gay people off. I'm like, that might have been true in the 80s, and that was certainly true when I was growing up. But it feels like they weren't on the pulse at all of what society was actually like now. And so maybe it was just dated from the start.
I really like The In-Betweeners, I've got to be honest with you. I mean, the thing that made it difficult for me with The In-Betweeners is I was a teacher at the time, and I do have a passing resemblance to Will, which you can see now. So I used to walk into a classroom and someone used to shout "Briefcase W" at me, and then that would make the lesson very tricky.
Right, fair enough. Okay.
Particularly when we're teaching Romeo and Juliet.
Fair enough. OK, well, we're going to move on now to another question from Ryan. Where is Ryan? Hello.
Hello, good evening. Were you surprised to learn that the Joker has become pregnant?
Oh no, because she puts it about. This is an odd one. So DC Comics, and obviously, as you know, the world of comics and Marvel and DC and everything, they're becoming sort of hyper woke with every sort of new edition that comes out. And this is now the Joker. The Joker's become pregnant, given birth to a version of himself. I mean, I don't know. It's all a load of nonsense, isn't it? Let's be honest. So it doesn't really bother me insofar as the whole thing is nonsense. I've got no interest in it. But doesn't this annoy the fans, though, this kind of stuff? Because it's a bit preachy, isn't it?
But look, it might annoy the fans, but when has anyone cared what virgins think, Andrew? Let's be honest. Do you know what?
Beware, some of those people watch this show.
Yeah, I know they do.
Not anymore.
No, not anymore. Yeah, all 6 of them have turned off. No, people can do what they want with these particular characters. I do understand why some people would get upset, actually, because if you are particularly engaged with a character and you like the type of character that it is, if people start messing around with it, then I get it, but I just think it's a non-issue.
Well, there's a lot of interesting things about this. So a lot of comic characters have been changed, like Thor became a woman, I think. Spider-Man became a woman, I think, or something like, various things like this happening. But the problem with this is that the fan base, the comic book fans, have always been outsiders. They've always been people who've never had a problem with sexual minorities or ethnic minorities because they've always been outsiders themselves.
Yeah.
So they feel a bit aggrieved that they're being preached at when they're not the ones with the problem.
Yeah. And I know it's obviously, picking up the zeitgeist of all what's happening right now. I get that. I mean, I think in this one, the Joker he vomits like a brown gooey thing, which sounds like he's obviously just giving birth to a poop, and basically it's his son, and grows up to be really handsome and beautiful. So
it just sounds ridiculous.
And it's just like, okay, so is he pregnant, or is it just like some goo that turns into?
Maybe it's one of those stories that the sort of someone's just written about in the press and sort of exaggerated things. But it all looks stupid to me, frankly. Anyway, we're going to move on now because we have to take a break. After the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be talking to Elliot Keck from the Taxpayers Alliance, and he's going to be here to tell us about police forces in England and Wales spending £66,000 on rainbow merchandise. Yay! See you in a minute.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. As we touched on at the start of the show, a report claims that police forces in England and Wales have spent £66,000 over a 3-year period on LGBT-themed merchandise. The money was spent between 2019 and 2022 and showed that an exact total of £66,689 was spent on items such as rainbow whistles, rainbow key rings, rainbow shoelaces, pens and lip balm. So the Taxpayers Alliance are behind the investigation, and their investigations campaign manager, Elliot Keck, joins me now. Welcome, Elliot. Thank you for coming. So you conducted this report and you found out the extent of the spending that's going on here. Can you give us some details about this?
Well, it's the first time I've had a round of applause being on GB News, actually, so that was a nice touch.
Oh, that was nice, yeah.
But
we tried to massage your ego.
Yeah. So we have there's this term in journalism called colour. So this is used to refer to the additional detail that sort of brings to life a story. And I think there's absolutely tons here, and it's pretty shocking. This is not just sort of, a rainbow flag to fly above the Forces headquarters during Pride Month. There is a absolutely huge amount here. It's about 66 grand, and there's some really, really brightly coloured items there.
Is the lip balm rainbow
Yeah,
coloured?
lip balm. So apparently it's, so I think that was Lancashire Police got rainbow coloured lip balm. Northamptonshire Police got rainbow coloured selfie frames. Kent Police got 2 types of rainbow pens, a curvy pen and a grip pen. And then my favourite, Wiltshire Police bought something called a rainbow fuzzy bug, which I actually don't know what it is. So
I'm sure it's essential in the, the pursuit of
I'm sure
criminals.
it's vital to fighting crime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this is interesting because we've all seen the sort of livery and the rainbow cars. We've all seen police officers doing the Macarena at Pride marches. Haven't they got better things to do?
Well, one does wonder. I mean, the stats on crime are really actually quite appalling. So only 5% of crimes in the latest year were led to a charge.
Yeah.
That was down from about 15% 7 years ago, and crime is up about sort of 5-6% since before the pandemic. So,
yes.
Clearly there is a lot for the police to be getting on with. And when you have a culture in which they're going out buying rainbow fuzzy bugs, rainbow sporks, rainbow water bottles, you do have to wonder if there's something wrong there.
I still want to know what a rainbow fuzzy bug is.
I looked it up and I couldn't quite find it exactly. Yeah.
But who's asking for all this stuff? I mean, I just can't imagine gay police officers saying they need to be validated by key rings.
Well, I think this is probably part of a theme that you touch on a lot in your show, which is the taking over of our institutions by HR departments, diversity departments, staffed with people that maybe got degrees that haven't led them to the fruitful employment that they were hoping.
Do you think that's all it is? People trying to remain relevant and justify their salaries?
Well, I certainly hope that it's not the actual police chiefs and the police officers themselves that are buying this.
Yeah.
It would be a bit more reassuring if it was the relatively useless back office staff.
Yes, I mean, I suppose they have to go along with it, don't they, the police? They don't really have a choice. Although, did they have to do the TikTok dances and that kind of thing? Or is that feels like that's coming from them?
Yeah, I mean, possibly.
But then what do we do about this? Because ultimately there is a serious point here, which is that the Progress Pride flag, which isn't just the rainbow flag, which always used to be associated with gay rights, it's the one with the extra chevrons, the extra symbols, the big
circles in there.
There's a circle for intersex rights. Someone put an umbrella in recently for sex workers' rights. So the whole thing is a big mess. It's really ugly. It's an absolute shambles, and you would expect gay people to be able to colour coordinate, but apparently not. And the thing about that flag is actually it has a kind of ideological meaning.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean equality for all, as the rainbow flag used to mean. The Progress Pride flag is a particularly identitarian movement, which is ideological in nature, and many people interpret as being anti-gay and anti-women. So aren't they sort of picking sides in a really sort of dodgy culture war?
Yeah, I think that's a concern. And by definition, a rainbow includes all colours of the spectrum, right? So you think it sort of serves a purpose. And it's actually costing the public institutions quite a lot of money, because if you keep on updating the flag every year, you have to keep on buying a new flag every year because the old one is no good anymore.
Well, maybe that's the point. There's a sort of financial element.
Yeah.
But when they put all those Progress Pride flags all the way down Regent Street in that very sort of austere way, very scary, militaristic kind of way, and a lot of feminists who I've spoken to, a lot of gay people who I've spoken to, they say that pride, that flag does not represent them and is actually openly hostile towards them. And aren't the police supposed to serve without fear or favour? Aren't they supposed to be impartial?
Well, absolutely. And I think this is why, this spending really needs to stop, because if it starts to go into a certain commitment to an ideological cause, which can be very controversial or, cause problems for many, many people, that's when it really needs to be cut out.
Do you think some of this is coming from the College of Policing? I mean, again, this is the Quango, of course, that runs the training for all police officers, and they have for years insisted on certain things such as non-crime hate incidents, such as the idea that someone from a protected characteristic can perceive that something has been hurtful and based on prejudice, and therefore it gets logged as a hate incident.
Yeah.
Right, and they were told by the Home Office to stop doing this. They were told by the courts, the High Court said this is unlawful, and they carried on. And it's only really now, you've had Chris Philp recently saying he's going to make sure chief constables stop doing it. But is it just the case that the police themselves are now completely ideologically captured, and this is another sign of that?
Well, I certainly hope it's not too late, and I certainly hope that something can be done. I mean, College of Policing is certainly a problem. We did an investigation that basically uncovered their inclusive language guides, all the different instructions to police forces about their terms and phrases that they are and aren't allowed to use. But I mean, I certainly hope that something can be done. I mean, we've always called for what we call a bonfire of the Quangos, which is where you scrap a lot of these bodies and bring it under more direct control of ministers. Because the problem is if you create a Quango for every single issue or cause or whatever it is, it's very difficult for ministers to get under control.
Because it's not just the Quangos, it's the civil service as well, and it does feel a lot like the machinery of government is captured, and that the government seems to be a little bit impotent to do anything about it.
Well, extraordinary. I mean, 12 years of Conservative government and police forces are buying rainbow fuzzy bugs.
Right, but that's my point, is that doesn't feel like a very Conservative thing to do.
No, it doesn't, no.
So where are the Tories on this? You know, again and again we keep hearing about what Keir Starmer's Labour Party will do and how they will escalate all of this because they don't know what a woman is, for instance. You know, at a very basic level. They're not going to get these cultural matters sorted. But really, all of this has happened under the Tories' watch, frankly.
Well, yeah, it has. And I mean, you know, whoever is in government next time after the next election should be looking at this sort of spending and thinking, actually, is this really a priority, regardless of what you think of the, the specific diversity agenda?
And your job at the Taxpayers Alliance is really to identify where the most egregious examples of public spending. Is this the worst that you've seen?
It's definitely some of the more colourful. I mean, it's not the largest amount in total. It's £66,000 over 3 years. Which, let's not beat around the bush. It's not a huge amount of money, but in terms of the actual nature of what they bought and the sheer pointlessness of it. And the pointlessness to I mean, it's just so obvious to everybody.
But it's the principle rather than the amount,
It is the principle,
isn't it?
and it's the attitude that it represents.
If they were spending a lot of money on, Che Guevara T-shirts or something like that, then we would also have a problem with that, wouldn't we? Because it would be them showing a sort of...
well, maybe that's my next research project.
Well, do you think they're actually doing that?
Well, I certainly hope not.
So do you have hope that this will... that actually drawing attention to this kind of thing in the way that you have will put pressure on the police maybe to change their ways?
I certainly hope so, and I think any government that comes in and any minister that comes in, no matter what they think of this, as I said, no matter what they think of this agenda, given the enormous problems that this country faces and that the police faces, they should be able to look at this and think, actually, would this money be better spent elsewhere?
But do you think part of it is a concern that they don't want to appear to be homophobic, and maybe they have failed in the past when it comes to certain minority issues? That's definitely been the case. So maybe there's a kind of overcorrection here. There's a kind of...
Yeah, that's certainly possible. I'm not sure rainbow fuzzy bugs will actually solve the issue, though.
No. Well, look, one day, Elliot, you'll come back on and we'll find one of these bugs.
Yes.
And we'll discuss it, because I have no idea what they look like.
No, me neither.
No.
So.
Well, Elliot Keck, thank you very much. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be asking whether social media trolls are putting Asian families off visiting the countryside. See you in a few minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrow.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView, channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. BBC presenter Nihal Arthanayaka has said that there is an illusion that rural areas are unwelcoming to ethnic minorities. Arthanayaka told the Country Walking magazine, there is this barrier, a perception often perpetuated by social media trolls, that the countryside is inherently white and middle class. So joining me now to discuss this is comedian and broadcaster Tommy Sandhu. Tommy, welcome to the show. We have got him somewhere, Tommy. He's coming in just one moment, but I'm going to come to my panel first about this. Now, look, I've heard this again and again for many years, this idea of the countryside being an essentially white domain, and that people feel that people of colour feel they can't go into the countryside. Do you think that's true? Is the countryside racist?
Well, sheep are white, predominantly. There is a lot of them, and we do know that they can behave very aggressively to somebody whose melanin count is quite high, so potentially...
Well, would you say that's true?
Well,
do you ever go in the countryside?
God for the black and white mixed race cows,
yeah.
Because obviously they will even out these things.
You know what, I kind of feel like the pair of you aren't taking this too seriously. Maybe have we got Tommy yet? Because it'd be great to talk to him. Tommy Sandhu, here he is. Welcome to the show, Tommy.
Ta-da!
Yeah, there you are. Are you offended by the countryside? Is it a racist domain?
Hugely. I'm now, because of what your lovely comedians have just said, I now feel the need that one of us has got to take this a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
So, look, and I think particularly Sajila may agree with this. It's not, no, the countryside is not welcoming to brown people. It's a cultural thing, right? You got to understand, I'm Punjabi. My family got on a boat for several weeks to come over to this country back in the 50s or whenever it was, for the one sole purpose to improve their lives. They left behind a load of countryside and fields. They don't want to come here and start walking around fields and countrysides. So it's a bit like it's a bit of a busman's holiday if they come over here and start walking around the fields. They're like, well, why did you leave India then? I think what's going on here is typically Asian families or minority families are in. It's drilled into you, work hard, be something. We're here to improve ourselves. This is a great country. This is a country of opportunities. So things like rambling, walking, hiking, and in general, actually, kind of leisurely activities, they weren't encouraged a generation ago, but things have massively changed. Like my mum and dad never even did holidays, but now things are changing. My generation, my kids, we live near Epping Forest, where I am right now in East London. And and we go out to the forest as often as possible. But you're right, it's still not the done thing for people from a brown background.
Well, this is interesting because, whenever I've been in the countryside, maybe I've missed this, but I've always seen people from all sorts of backgrounds in the countryside. Is that just the forest that I hang out in?
Probably. You've got a multicultural forest. I don't know where it is. Or maybe your forest is located somewhere on the borders where lots of foreigners are coming through. I don't know. But what this is honestly, I think it's just a work ethic. It's a cultural thing. And it is a bit of a nonsense point. And the last thing I'd want is for British people, including myself, to feel like, oh no, the countryside is racist. And actually, that's not what Nihal was saying. He's saying there's an illusion. And what he also refers to is social media trolls that are somehow creating this divide. I've never seen a tweet, an Instagram post, a Facebook post says, "Why you brownies? When we see you in the fields, we're gonna get you." like there is no social media trolls putting me off going to the countryside.
I think it's important that you made the point that Nihal wasn't saying that the countryside is racist or that is a perception. But actually, I have seen people post and say that they feel the countryside is exclusionary to those who aren't from a middle-class white background. I've even seen an article, I can't remember the publication, I wish I could, which said that the countryside was exclusionary to LGBT people, as though we can't walk into a field. So there are people who are attempting to make this a means by which people can be victimised further for no good reason.
I agree, but in this, I think again, it's more down to probably people's own insecurity. They're all feeling that maybe when you do go to the countryside, I love it. When I walk into a country pub, I will get people looking around. You definitely get a turn of heads. A little air of silence, that you've walked in. But that could well be because a Londoner's walked in, not necessarily because a brown person's walked in.
I've had that as well. Maybe because I hang out in Forest. But I think that with those sort of local pubs, it's often because you're not known. It's often because they all know each other. They drink with each other all the time. And I suppose you could interpret that as being hostile in some way, maybe.
Yeah, but it's really not. And that's, again, what Nihal was saying was actually when you get talking to locals, you realise how friendly they are and how wild they are. I did have someone in Bournemouth once come up to me and she was an old white lady and she just was staring at me. And I said, "Are you all right? You lost?" And she went, "Where are you from?" Right? That question. And I said, "Oh, Punjabi roots, but from East London and all that, like I normally do." And she went, lovely brown skin." She was just wowed by it. So sometimes, that kind of being a little bit unfamiliar, it's kind of down to the individual as well, so how we want to carry that. And you got to also understand, I mean, Andrew, when was the last time you went into a Sikh temple, a Gurdwara?
I must say it's been a while, as in never.
But you are welcome. See, everybody, I'm Sikh, my background is Sikh, anybody from any background is welcome to walk into a Sikh temple and there is food there and you can eat. As long as you cover your head, take your shoes off, you respect it. In the same way, you wouldn't necessarily just walk on in there and feel comfortable. You might feel like you get looks because it's just culturally, you will stand out. Culturally, at the moment, a brown person, a black family walking through the forest does stand out. I tell you what, even I live near Epping Forest. When I see a group of like black and Asian guys all on their bicycles, I sort of look at them like, hey, that's a new thing. My dad and his mates would not have gone cycling through the forest because they were here to work. But our new generation will.
Do you ever think, Tommy, I mean, sometimes I feel a little bit sad that the way that we really emphasise race now in a way that we didn't when I was growing up. We didn't really, we just didn't care. We were just nice to each other and no one treated each other differently because of their race. But now there's a kind of hyper-racialised identity politics that has come in that has make us notice our differences more and more, which perhaps isn't as progressive as it thinks it is.
I agree. And even like what you were discussing earlier on when I was watching the show about the roots behind what you can say and kind of cancel culture and language. Oh, comedy. That's what we're looking at, about the in-betweeners. Yes, we know that deep down, if you go down to the, kind of the acorn behind some of the jokes that are made, there might be a serious racist point. But if you did that with everything, as we are now doing, then actually there's no fun for anyone, and there is some innocent fun. What I will say is racists aren't just in the countryside and they aren't just in England, they're in India. If you walked into a pub equivalent somewhere in India, you'd get looks, you'd be made to feel a little bit unwelcome. You'd be a little bit alien to them. So, but whether someone is actually feeling racial hatred or whether someone's a bit like, hey, he doesn't look like he's from around there, or he looks a bit different, or she looks a bit different, that's very different. And curiosity, and we can't now inquire about people, we can't ask questions about culture and heritage to learn because we're in danger of offending people. Exactly what you're saying, that hyper, like kind of raised sensitivity around the issue. And I don't like articles and stories like this because I love Britain and I loved my time in Bournemouth University where I lived for years. And I also liked actually the fact that I was one of only a few brown people down there. Bit of a novelty factor. I come from East London where there's a lot of brown people. So I wanted to study in a place that wasn't like, the way where I was growing up. But again, I think it comes down to the individual. I think, I would ask sort of brown and black people or people of colour or people who feel that they may be not welcome in certain areas to actually just go and embrace it and almost drop that. That doesn't exist. And we know people from rural countryside areas are the most hospitable. We know they're the most, sometimes the most warmest people ever. And they've definitely got more time to chat, more time to share stories. And there's more similarities probably with people from ethnic backgrounds to those from the countryside, with the farming, with the rural life. That's a lot more relatable to me than city life.
Well, that's a nice note to end on. Don't fear the countryside. Tommy Sandu, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you.
After the break on Free Speech Nation, Aussies fight each other with tree branches, dancing cats duel with Prince Harry for video viewings, and an up-and-coming young comedian we all know and love finds himself chastised by TikTok. It's almost time for social sensations. See you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere. Amazing! You see, amazing! You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel. Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful. Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there. Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. It's time for that part of the show when we dedicate to the stories which have been catching people's eyes on social media. And as you may have noticed this week, Prince Harry has been making quite a few headlines. One video which became extremely popular is from someone we all know and love. Let's take a look.
The bloke's got 2 A-levels, and one of them's an E&R. He's got the intellectual ability of a toenail. And say what you like about toenails, but at least they've got the capacity for growth. And Harry is now coming across as a right winchbag. He's complaining that his brother beat him up. Of course your brother beat you up. You're the little brother. That's your job, to take a beating. And now you're moaning because he ripped your necklace. Why are you wearing a necklace? You're Harry Windsor, not Harry Styles.
So, Francis, this has been... Yes, you deserve that. This has been banned on TikTok.
Yes.
Are you kidding?
No, I am not kidding. It got banned on TikTok for hateful ideology.
So, is there something we're missing then? Was that the whole video? Is there something else?
No. It's not the whole video. Your producer butchered it. I will be making a complaint.
Okay.
But there is literally nothing there that is offensive in any shape or form. It's just
hateful ideology.
Yeah, exactly.
Or hateful Harryology.
Yes.
Yeah, but what's wrong with... I mean, surely, mocking a prince is the very definition of punching up.
But the thing is, if you think about it, he is in a minority, isn't he? Because how many princes are there in this country?
OK, yeah, but I think he's fair game. I think surely celebrity... You're allowed to mock celebrities, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, I long for the day when I become a celebrity and you can mock me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He should be flattered.
I know. It's a flattering thing, isn't it?
And he's the one who told us all about the fight and breaking the dog bowl, and he put it out there.
I actually thought it was a really funny routine. I have to say, well done. It was a really funny routine. I don't think it should have been... I mean, there's other things that I'd probably ban, not that one.
No, not that one, Francis.
Yeah.
OK, so... we're going to move on to the next one. This is from Down Under. This is from Australia, obviously. Two Aussies hoping to star in a Harry Potter remake. Let's have a look. OK, so two Aussies... if you're listening on radio, there's two people attempting to hit each other with sticks and failing. It's very unclear as to whether this is an actual fight or a kind of staged, dramatic, theatrical event. I can't be sure. Francis, what is going on there?
I don't actually know.
Why has that gone viral?
No, I have no idea. I mean, it is gripping because you are thinking, I wonder what's going to happen here.
Do you think it's a real fight?
Yeah, well, there's one with a smaller stick and he's got a high-vis jacket on. The other one's got a bigger stick. And the one with the bigger stick seems to keep missing the one with the small stick with a high-vis jacket. Yeah. You keep missing him. How rubbish are you? And you've got a bigger stick.
I mean, it's... Oh, for goodness sake. I mean, it's just not that... It's not that interesting, is it?
No.
Why did that go viral? Anyway, we're going to move on now. We're going to move on to another video, and this one is... well, it's not just Prince Harry that's been taking over the internet. Evan Harry can't compete for views with a dancing cat. Here we go. Let's have a look.
To the chorus. Come here, girl. Go ahead, be gone with it. Come to the back. Go ahead, be gone with it. VIP. Go ahead, be gone with it. Drinks on me. Go ahead, be gone with it. Twerking with. Go ahead.
Oh, that's
I find that really disturbing.
kitten abuse.
But has the kitten consented to be manipulated in that way? I mean, is that what's going on there, Francis? I'm lost for words.
Well, it's somebody taking their kitten and then putting them in a deeply uncomfortable situation in order to garner views and likes on the internet.
This is why TikTok is the demolition of society.
It is.
And civilization.
Yeah.
And one day people will look back and think that we think that that's high art.
Yeah.
And that's what we produce. Do you not find that a bit depressing?
If you're saying that, there's probably some university like in 100 years' time from now, and they'll be studying that. You're right, but I just think that poor cat. You can see it in his eyes, just sort of like, I hate humans. I hate humans.
Do you know the Taliban are probably somewhere pointing at this, showing their recruits going, this is the way the West must be destroyed.
Exactly. Western decadence.
Yeah.
Because even their animals dance. OK. I've got to move on because I am finding that too disturbing. So this is the part of the show, just to end and wrap everything up. This is where we're going to talk through your unfiltered dilemmas, and I do appreciate you emailing your problems in, opening your hearts to us. Let's go for a first dilemma now. This is from Emma. Emma has said, I've been with my boyfriend for over 7 years and I'm really ready to take the next step. The problem is I don't think he is. I keep dropping hints, but he doesn't seem to be catching on. What else should I do? Depends what you mean by the next step. Do you mean divorce or breaking up or introduce a third party? What do you think the next step is?
Well, this is a problem. Men, as we all know, we're not the brightest. We're not very good at visual or social clues. Right. You're going to need to spell it out.
And I think she means marriage, right?
Yeah, she obviously means marriage, but there is such a thing as the 7-year itch. And you've been together for 7 years, he's not taking the hint. I think he's cheating on you. He's just not that into you, love.
I should just say, Emma, I'm not so sure that he's cheating on you, and I wouldn't like to make that claim about total strangers, Sajila. You've just ruined that relationship.
I bet you I'm right, though. I bet you I'm right.
Okay.
Check his phone.
Moving swiftly on. Actually, apparently we don't have time, so we're gonna actually close the show on that note. Completely destroying a relationship. Yeah. In the
Sorry,
show.
Emma. Sorry, Emma. The truth hurts. I'm sorry.
You should be a relationship counsellor.
Why am I not a relationship counsellor? I'd be a great agony aunt.
Moonlight and do that. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us for Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This was the week when it was discovered that the UK police had a rainbow addiction, a school in Skegness banned sarcasm, and Prince Harry annoyed just about everyone. Thank you, of course, to my lovely panel, Sajila Kershi and Francis Foster, and to all of my brilliant guests. And by the way, if you want to join us live in the studio, you can definitely do that. You can come along. Just please go to www.sroaudiences.com and you can apply. Come along. We've got food, we've got wine, we've got vol au vents, we've got the lot. So do come along and join us. Stay tuned for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight. That's next. And don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. Thanks for watching Free Speech Nation. Farewell.
Tomorrow's weather in the UK will start the morning on a showery note in the west, whilst clearer in the east. Let's take a look at the details. Blustery showers will feed in across the northern and western Isles and western parts of the Scottish mainland early on Monday. Further east it will be clearer but chilly with icy patches. A mix of clear spells and scattered showers will affect Northern Ireland, and there will be a particularly strong and gusty westerly wind blowing. To the east of the Pennines there will be a lot of fine weather, but plenty of showers are likely to affect Cumbria and Lancashire. The north and west of Wales will also have a showery start with brisk and gusty winds. Areas further south and east will escape with something a little drier and clearer. Apart from the odd shower making inroads into the west, most of the Midlands can expect a dry start on Monday, and across the East Midlands especially, some lengthy cloud breaks are likely. Across East Anglia, the new working week should start dry and in places reasonably clear, although temperatures will be on the chilly side. A westerly breeze will affect the southern counties of England, although apart from that, the early part of the morning promises to be mostly dry with just patchy cloud. A few showers will affect England and Wales through the morning, but they'll be mostly widespread in the northwest, accompanied by strong winds. And that is how the weather is shaping up during tomorrow morning.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique